Oh, dear Heavenly Father, we give thanks for this opportunity yet that we're able to freely discuss things from your point of view, from a Christian worldview. We ask and pray that your Spirit be upon Jeff as he teaches us. And we also pray that your Spirit be on us, that our ears may hear and our minds may listen to what he has to say. We pray this in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. Thank you.
Amen.
Well, Millie, thank you for those announcements. Chuck, for the opening prayer. Good to see you all, and those of you who are joining us online as well. Very much looking forward to our session this evening. For the most part, Donna Weeks will be covering, commenting on chapter 4, which is a new kind of Christian politics. And so I know we're all eagerly awaiting her insights into that chapter. But we are going to start off actually with Buddy and Jennifer Bell. And several weeks ago, when we were still talking about Francis Schaeffer's works, and in particular his critiques of modern art, it sparked some good dialogue with Jennifer and Buddy. Their daughter is getting a minor in art at the University of Georgia. And I'd heard a little bit about some of the travails in which she was laboring there at UGA as pursuing that degree in art. And so the more we talked, the more it occurred to me that Catherine's experiences there are so extremely relevant to what Francis Schaeffer wrote about and what we've talked about to some extent, and that is just the wholesale corruption and perversion of the arts. Now, when you look at the general decline of Western civilization, it really started in the field of philosophy, of course, as you would expect. But very quickly, by the late 1800s, one of the areas of culture that most eagerly embraced all these new secularistic and frankly, oftentimes immoral impulses was the field of the arts, the visual arts, music, and then, of course, as we transition into the 20th century, movies and so on. And so I know your comments are going to be very informative and extremely, unfortunately, extremely relevant as well. So very much looking forward to it. So why don't we, without further ado, just go ahead and come on up and share with us you and your daughter's experiences over the last year or so. Thanks.
So we are not professionals, and we did not sleep at Holiday Inn Express last night. So we will see how this goes, because the first thing I got to do is pull up a slide here. So first of all, let me start by saying Catherine still did get a great education at UTA. So whatever, this was just, she made it the whole 4 years without anything like what we're about to show, but in the final few semesters here, it did crop up. So I'm looking forward. But see, when I'm up here, my IQ drops about 50%. There we go. I got you. There we go. All right. It's highlighted. Share. Boom. All right. So her first day of class, this was in the fall. It was a painting class. So this was the first day of class she went to. She just met the TA. So the professor was not there. Paul wants to do something? You can do it. You're welcome. Do you want to do that? Oh, did you want to make it bigger? All right. So, but she did meet the TA, and this was the TA. Not sure if it was male or female. And they also, well, we just actually found out this was a Stranger Things t-shirt. Not sure. I wasn't aware of that, but it says Hellfire Club on it. That was the first day. So then the second class, she comes in and she said she got there on time, but there were some, like, apparently some of these art teachers, they're so cool that they have groupies that hang out with them. So she got to class and the hanger outers were already there, and he was cussing and yelling and telling a story. But so they come in and sit down, and he starts talking about the policies of the class. And he said, I'll tell you how to get an A in my class. He's like, first of all, you can try to get an A, but you may or may not. It just depends on how I feel. But if you want to guarantee an A, bring me a bottle of gin. I like gin a lot, and that will get you an A for sure. Because the only other sure way to get an A is if you die, because anyone that dies gets an automatic A. And so one student spoke up and said, hey, I was thinking about killing myself, so I might as well get an A for it anyway. And everybody kind of laughed, and he proceeded to laugh as well. And then he
was concerned about this student.
Yes, like, but based on the look of the student might not have been joking on the fact that when he said what he said. And then he started talking about money. He's like, hey, you know what? I love money. I love money. I love making money. Oh, gotcha. Okay. Sorry, Paul's giving me directions. All right, perfect. I love money. Money's great. Because you know what? Sometimes we may not have class because I'm going to be traveling, doing a second business, making money. So you don't even have to come to class. I'm going to go make money because I want to make money, spend money, die, and burn in hell. Whoa. So this was his first day of class talking to his students. So then it turned to, he was interested in getting everybody's worldview. So he started out with, let's go around and talk about what's going on in the country, and I want to hear what you think about it. And it's funny, we had just gone on vacation over the summer, and there was some airline issues. And so a lot of the students brought up, the big events of the country, and Catherine was a little skeptical to say anything about her worldview. So she mentioned that there might be flight attendant strike. She's like, oh, I heard there might be a flight attendant strike, but everybody else was, LGBT and transgender and all this. And then he went on to say, not only tell me what you think about what's going on in the country, tell me what you think. Tell me what you believe. Tell me, express yourself. If you want to set the president on fire, if you want to set Donald Trump on fire, set effing Donald Trump on fire. Because if somebody tells me to bake a cake, I'm going to bake a cake because I love money. It's all about the money. And then he said, sometimes we may not have class if y'all want to go, because I'm going to go downtown and drink, and y'all are welcome to go with me. Let's go downtown and drink together. And then at the very end, he discussed his syllabus. And at the bottom of the syllabus was a disclaimer, and it said, I will not be held accountable for any of my words or actions. You can try to make a case against me, but I have a really good lawyer, and I'll either claim Tourette's or claim to be an alcoholic or a drug addict. I'll be put in rehab and will not be fired and still get my paycheck. So that was 2 hours of class, and she never went back. She called us and said, I think I want to drop this class. What was the class? Painting. Yes. So that was the first experience. So that class.
No, that was drawing.
Oh, sorry, it wasn't painting, it was drawing. It was a drawing class, yeah. Second class was painting. So that first class was in the fall. Second class was just this past semester. And so in this class, this guy was not as outwardly in your face crazy as I felt the other. So our biggest things on this class was, so the professor was kind of focused on nude paintings, but not just nude paintings, but multiple people in the painting, multiple positions and different things going on. And he always had them up on the projector and always wanted to talk about them. And then from there, they were given an assignment. So the assignment was around Max Beckham. And so the assignment was to emulate Max Beckham's style. And Catherine said, a lot of times professors will say, they'll pick a genre of painting and say, study this and paint something, your take on this type. But in this case, the professor they had to do Max Beckman. They couldn't do a general or anything. It had to be Max Beckman. And so we just pulled up some stuff on Max Beckman. You can see his self-portrait there and some of his paintings. So yeah, just a little.
What is that main picture?
So
What is it?
it's people, it's bodies, and I don't have the whole title.
These
The more
are, we
often
had to
die-
choose some of the more G-rated, PG-rated, because
Yeah.
if you look him up, it's.
Yeah, and so on this next slide here, we
What
have
does
a.
that say about a nervous breakdown?
Oh yeah, so he was actually he volunteered for the Army in World War I in 1914. He trained as a medical orderly, but wound up in different hospitals until he was discharged. And in 1915, he had a nervous breakdown on the Belgian front. And then here's a quote by him. And this is another painting of his. The painting is titled "The Descent from the Cross." I would meander through all the sewers of the world, through degradations and humiliations in order to paint. I have to do this until the last drop. Every vision that exists in my being must be purged. Then it will be a pleasure for me to be rid of this damned torture. And so this was just to show you, what our daughter had to study and try to paint something like that. And so she emulated, the painting she used to emulate was this one. So it's Beckman's triptych, The Departure. And so a triptych, we learned, is like a 3-paneled painting. And she chose the one in the middle, which is called The Homecoming. And so not only did she have to paint a picture, but she had to write about it. And then she had to get in front of class and talk about her painting. And so we have the letter that she presented in class to talk about her painting. And we have the painting, and I will show it to you. So this is what she painted, based on the middle
Hold it
picture.
up a little bit. Yeah.
She calls it her revenge painting.
Don't move, don't move. There you go.
So, not to end on a unfortunate note, she knew, she'd gone 2 times a week for 2 months and had a good feeling that she was toying with the idea of dropping this class because she just didn't want to sit under this teaching much longer. And it was just an art minor. She was an interior design major with an art minor. And when he found that out, he was kind of like, oh, so you're just going to go to work for the big man, and kind of, there were several other ways that he was just not very helpful. So these are the 2 side by side. So this is the beautiful part, is they each student had to present their painting, and then everyone sat there, and then he would critique the painting when they got done, and they had to read their whatever essay about the painting. So she called this Under the Influence. The Max Beckman painting I chose for this project. I may not be able to read this. Sorry.
Let's see if I can do this. The Max Beckman painting I chose for this project was The Homecoming from the Departure triptych from 1932. The scene depicted in this painting is a stark contrast between the 2 torture scenes in the paintings on either side. The serene picture of a king and queen in a boat represents hope and relief from the pain in the other 2 paintings. This triptych led me to illustrate the story of the miraculous catch of fish from Luke 5, when Jesus calls the disciples for the first time. Luke 5, 4 through 11. And when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch." And Simon answered, "Master, we toiled all night and took nothing, but at your word I will let down the nets." And when they had done this, they enclosed a large number of fish, and their nets were breaking. They signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help, and they came and filled both boats so that they began to sink. But when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." For he and all who were with him were astonished at the catch of fish that they had taken. And so also were James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon, "Do not be afraid. From now on you will be catching men." And when they had brought their boats to land, they left everything and followed him. Just like the homecoming symbolizes hope of freedom, the miraculous catch symbolizes the hope of salvation. The disciples did not believe they would catch any fish because of their night of empty nets. However, Jesus showed them again through this miracle that he is the sovereign Lord over all creation. At this point in his ministry, Jesus had performed many miracles, healing the sick and casting out demons. Even after all of these miracles, Simon Peter did not fully trust Jesus' word. This story shows that Jesus provides for us even in the midst of our distrust and unbelief. Jesus was not who the Jewish people expected him to be. They expected a powerful king to come down from heaven and defeat the Romans. However, Jesus came humbly as a servant to love his people, show everyone. For our sake, he made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. God sent his son to earth to live the perfect life that we could never live and take the penalty for sin that we deserve. He suffered not only the pain of physical death, but the wrath of God. After 3 days, Jesus conquered death as he rose from the grave and sealed our salvation. He did all of this because of his great love for us. We do not have to earn our salvation because Christ has already earned it for us. If we trust in the Lord and follow him, then we can rest in the joy we have because of Christ. And so that's what she read in front of this class. And then at the end, the professor looked at the painting and said, "Why didn't you paint the faces? Is this a skill issue? Do you not know how to paint faces?" And it would have been better if she would have drawn Jesus weird looking.
He kept telling her as she was painting it, she would check in with him, and he kept trying to get her to paint Jesus a different way. And so proud of her that she stood her ground. And you know, it's a public secular university, and I always say wherever your children go, they can find the party or the pulpit, whether, you know, any college, you can find that. So I had some great advice. I was telling Allegra this weekend about someone who told us to make sure that they found a campus ministry, and she got plugged in, thank God, early to campus ministries and churches. And I just think that it's so important because of that and her foundation, and having a great group of Christian friends at UGA, she was able to be strong. And even though she dropped the class, this was her final. So anyway.
Oh, don't go away. I'm sure there'll be
Wonderful. Yeah, by the way, our older son met his wife in the Wesley Fellowship there at UGA when they were in college there. Yeah. So comments, questions?
I just want to,
Yes.
did she say what the class's reaction was to her painting and her reading, other than the teacher, of course, being critical?
Good question. She didn't really say much, but she did say that when I asked her, I was like, "Are you the only Christian there?" And she said, "Yeah, I think I'm the only one." And it was a pretty large class. And she said there may be one other nominal, like name only, but for the most part, most of the students she's come across in the art school in particular have not been Christians. And she's had so many opportunities. She said, "Mom, they're actually very open." And it's like being in a foreign country almost. Like she's been shocked as she's been in the studio painting, you know, she'll have these conversations. And she said, many of these students are just open books. Like they've had so much hurt in their lives that they're very open. And she's been able to share the gospel one-on-one with several students. The Lord has just provided those beautiful opportunities.
That's amazing. What a brave girl.
Absolutely.
No, she-
Quite a testament to her parents.
Absolutely.
What year was it?
This year, yeah. So fall was the first one that we described that she dropped within, she said within 2 hours she knew. She said it was not a safe place for a conservative Christian young lady. Yeah, she's like, I'm not, yeah. And then the second one, she tried, like he wasn't as bad in the beginning, but there were other things like when he found out she was just an art minor and not an art major, he was like, "Oh, so you're working for the big man." And then the studio time that she was supposed to have gotten and she had the criteria for it, he was like, gave it to somebody else who was in the art school. So there were a lot of just very subtle kind of things. So that was in the spring. But again, she, you know, we kept telling her, you know, you don't need an art minor, you know, if you get it, great. If you don't, great. We were just very like open-handed with her, like just, you know, whatever. And the Lord provided because she still got her minor and was able to meet the criteria. So, yeah.
What a testimony.
it is. I mean, he definitely, I mean, he's there at that school, and I think there's revival happening among the students, and there's so many opportunities to share your faith if you're bold. Yeah.
You may want to put a bug in her ear about this. There is an absolutely astoundingly good art museum in Athens. And it's a state museum. I forget what it's called, the State Georgia Museum of Art. Well, I'm not sure the name of it. It's very easy to find. It's very large, and a very high percentage of the religious paintings are on like permanent loan from Bob Jones University, because Bob Jones brought up all of these. There was a particular style of religious art that went out of favor with modernism or something. And he's like, but these are gorgeous.
Oh,
And they're Christian and they're beautiful, and let's just buy them, start buying, bulk quantities of these. And then some of these are very famous artists. It's not just junk that he bought. Christians, especially of more backwoods varieties, have a reputation for being anti-art or whatever. But no, these are the real stuff. These are Italian. These are the real thing.
wow.
And there's just a ton of them out there in Athens at this museum. So
I'll have to tell her. Yeah.
And it's free. And it's free.
Yeah.
Hunter's not on any of them, are
What?
Hunter's not on any of them.
Oh.
Hunter finds art.
So, we talked about how that these trends began in the field of philosophy, and then they trickled down into the arts and, frankly, the social sciences, the natural sciences, every aspect of life. Buddy and Jennifer, did you ever ask Catherine, why are these professors and most of the students, why are they so taken by distortion art? Which of course became the real rage in the early 20th century and has continued to the present as well. And that is true art. Let me go back here. True art, according to these people, is distortionistic. In other words, if you were to portray human beings as, beautiful creations of God, they would see that as inauthentic. So have you ever talked much about that concept with her? Why is so much modern art ugly and distortion?
That's a good question. I'll have to ask her. Like I said, she's just an art minor. And our very first tour of the art school, when she wasn't even a student, we went to the art school, and it was, there was a lot on the walls that I was, at that time, I was like, I don't think this is the place for you. And we decided on interior design, which is under a different college. But no, I mean, like I said, up until this year, it's been pretty good. But this year, for some reason, I guess in the upper level classes, she really saw the ugly.
I think one of the most representative remarks by Karl Marx was, not to be too alliterative or whatever, is everything that exists needs to die. And of course, he's talking about Western civilization, Christian influenced Western civilization. Everything that exists needs to die so that we can recreate a secular utopian paradise on earth. And so any art that depicts beauty and uplifts the soul and so on would be inauthentic for somebody like Karl Marx and all of his millions of disciples ever since. And that would go for not just visual arts, but it would go for music as well. So many of the popular music art forms in recent decades have expressed that same idea, and that is that if music is beautiful and uplifting to the soul, and we would see it as uplifting to the soul, they would see it as totally inauthentic, and because it doesn't depict how awful America is, how awful Western civilization is, and so on.
Yeah, like we have so many criticisms of her portrait that she did, and when you talked about the faces not being there being a skill issue, I said, well, Catherine, you should have told them they don't have faces because they can represent all of us. Because know, Mom, I wish I'd thought about that. That was the Holy Spirit, I'm sure. But she just made it, he was like, you know, kept knocking pieces of it because it didn't
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
She said, one of these things weird, and I said, what do you know weird?
Uh-huh.
She didn't have words. Like, it felt very uncomfortable with the way he wanted her to portray Jesus.
And yet he loves this sort of representation. Yeah. So,
Jeffrey, there's some chat that I-
oh, yes, I noticed. I'm sorry. Let me take a look here at the chats and this is from Janet Verba. How sick and disgusting for any educator to talk like that. Well, you're absolutely right, Janet. Janet goes on to say, I'm a high school educator and always am prepared to have an alternative text a student can do if the one the class is doing offends someone. Okay. And what college is she at? She's at University of Georgia. Uh-huh. It's yeah, you're absolutely correct. Yeah. Probably not at Hillsdale College, but probably everywhere other than Hillsdale, or virtually anywhere other than Hillsdale. All right, any other thoughts, questions, or comments? Before, yes, please.
I want to see how far the music is going.
Uh-huh.
You look at the song Jolene that Dolly Parton wrote, and you look at the new lyrics that Beyonce wrote. It's a totally different song.
Oh, to the same song or
Same
something?
song.
Oh, really?
Oh.
Huh.
Yeah, you can Google it. I just Googled it. Just Google the lyrics. It is a completely different song. It's gone from a woman begging another woman not to take a bath, to a woman saying, "Don't you dare come here, or I'm gonna shoot you."
Charming.
Yeah, charming.
It's
Mhm.
unbelievable.
Yeah. Okay, well, again, thank you very much. Unfortunately, very relevant and very informative. So, boy, what a testimony to you and Buddy, to you both. Catherine's faith and her courage.
Well, one thing I forgot to say, because I got so up there, but when you said a couple of weeks ago, and I was gonna write this to you, that this ministry was started for the, what percent, the 5% of people? I'm so thankful, because honestly, I've been coming to your class since 2004, you don't pray for kids.
Thank the Lord. All right, well, very much looking forward to Donna's presentation on chapter 4 in the Benedict option on politics in particular. The whole book, of course, integrates politics into our calling as Christians in today's world, but this one focuses in exclusively on the topic. So Donna, very much looking forward to that. And Paul, maybe you could help kind of set the stage here for Donna. Dan, comment?
Yeah, real quick, Jeffrey, shut me down if you've already commended this resource.
I have. Okay, Donna, go ahead.
But on my way over here, I listened to Rod Dreer's Areopagus Forum talk.
Oh, yeah.
From a few years ago, and
Yeah.
it's very easy to find on YouTube. Just type Areopagus and Dreer into the YouTube search engine, and you're right there. And I haven't heard all the questions and answers because it's like an hour and a half or something. But
Yeah, it was a couple hours.
His talk is pretty tight and very.
Oh, it
very,
was.
very thorough and yet informative. So I'll shut up.
And I really enjoyed getting to know him.
Yeah.
But of course, he's had a challenging and difficult, time the last several years.
But he gives a really nice overview of the book and his ideas and his motivation. So it's a very
Right.
good talk.
Yes, it was.
And he was quoted somewhere today on either The World and Everything in It or Moeller. I don't remember which one, but
Really?
yeah. So he's
Still influential.
Yes.
Very good. Well, Donna, looking forward to it.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Yes. IT first. No, I had to have it. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. So let me say, while he's pulling up this PowerPoint, I'm not giving a talk with a PowerPoint, so wish me luck and pray for me. So, to push the right buttons at the right time. Stop the share.
Thank you.
That's what he said, not me.
I was hitting F5, it wasn't going.
You might want to ask them if they're seeing it.
Can you guys see the screen or see the PowerPoint online?
Yes, we can see it.
You can see it. Thank you. Thank you. Just imagine my face.
Right, how do I minimize this? This.
Oh, the bar.
That pretty much stays.
Can you not scroll it up?
Stick it at the top. You can move it up. Yeah. If you take the, it'll go up by itself if you take the mouse off of it, I believe.
And then to make it go, I just push the arrow.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Make it go. The technical term. Okay.
Okay. Go.
Go. All right. Great. So I get to talk about politics, one of my favorite subjects, which is why I get to do this chapter. All right. But it is a new kind of politics, according to Dreer. So a new kind of Christian politics, chapter 4. Now, Jeffrey's outline, quite frankly, I mind it's expanded and different. So it won't get you far, but the PowerPoint will help. And I do stay very closely with the chapter in the book. So it'll be easy if you guys wanted to look at that. So I'll start with, again, new kind of Christian politics. A basic thesis, it seems, for the chapter. Christians need to rethink their political ideology and involvement. And I would say an action statement to kind of wrap it up. The Benedict option calls for a radical new way of doing politics, a hands-on localism based on the work of Eastern Bloc dissidents who defied communism during the Cold War. But why do we need a new way? Well, we are living in a political earthquake, if you haven't noticed. Our foundations are being shaken and uprooted. Just to name a few of the foundations, there were so many things that we took for granted in our life. Things like America's a good nation. If you ask a lot of people now, they don't think so. Our founding fathers were well-meaning men of good character. No more. I mean, these were things that we just grew up. What do they say on Breakpoint? The water we swim in. I mean, these were things we all just knew were true. Our capitalist system, though flawed, is the best option for optimal human flourishing. No more. So many of our young people think that socialism is the next way, or even communism. And you ask them, and they think that's what we're supposed to do. People no longer believe that marriage is good, and you have to actually give an apologetic for marriage, when in all of our lives, it has just been an assumed good in our life. No more, no more. And that churches are no longer considered good and needed. Actually, they're considered evil. And every ist that you can think of, racist, sexist, misogynist, transphobic, homophobic, it's been turned upside down. So what we're facing now, our old familiar way of politics won't meet what we need. And the old way of politics are dead or dying. So where should we go? What should we do? Which side are we on? So Dreer has some interesting answers that some people find a little off-putting. They may not like them, but especially, he says, I thought it was cute, the many conservatives who equate church with the Republican Party and show more enthusiasm in the voting booth than in church. Now, that's not us, but there are a number out there. But I think in addition to those people, we must wake up to the reality of the growing open hostility to Christians, if we haven't already. And again, just some other things. I mean, the hostility to Christians is all over TV, unless Fox News and any other network and most news stations in Hollywood, anything you listen to, the newest pejorative for Christians is a Christian nationalist. And if you dare say that you want your Christian values reflected in laws or in government or politicians, you're called a Christian nationalist. Not that they could define it. It's too nebulous. They just take it and throw it out wherever they want to and have it mean whatever they want it to. But we know that it's supposed to be negative. They condemn most all biblical truths like marriage, family, sacrifice, absolutes. All of these are going by the wayside. So in light of this current and growing hostility and eroding values, the Benedict option calls for a new vision and a new way of being active in politics. It's a westernized form of anti-political politics, a way forward for Christians seeking effective engagement in public life without losing our integrity or our humanity. But first, like I said, following the chapter, we're going to take a very brief look at the rise and fall of values voters. So you can, up until about the 60s and the civil rights movement and voting rights in 1965, most Americans voted on the economy. At that point, we still, can't believe it, had a sufficient moral consensus to keep sex and sexuality apolitical. But with the sexual revolution and Roe versus Wade in 1973, we saw the rise of the religious right with Republicans and the secular left with the Democrat Party. Americans began sorting themselves politically and according to moral beliefs. Oh, I forgot that screen. All right. Oh. So we're looking at here. So whereas elections once pitted the party of the working class against the party of Wall Street, they now pit voters who believe in fixing universal morality against those who see moral issues, especially sexual ones, as elastic and subject to personal choice. Now, again, I thought this picture was a great representation of the two extremes. I mean, you have a man saying he's a woman competing against a woman, and he wins the medal and takes it from her. And you have most people saying there's no problem with having that man standing there against the woman and taking from her. Yeah, it's appalling. So this quote was in 2003, and look at today. And we can all see that the culture war, if not over, we are losing. It's not good. And that's a tough pill to swallow, especially for Americans. We are accustomed to fighting to win, and to admit defeat is just not in our patriotic DNA. But losing or lost, we have. Now, let me say, because I want to reassure everyone, being that we're losing or may have lost this culture war does not mean we give up the fight. It does not mean that we lay down our arms or that we surrender, but it means we face the reality. We continue to fight with truth and light and the way of Jesus, but we have to also live in the reality of where we are now and not continue to function as things were. So those of us who are the remaining so-called values voters, conservatives, Christians, traditionalists, we occupy the political social margins. Christian values are no longer mainstream, not by a long shot. So writing in 2017, Dreher states that the moral issues may not have been as central to our politics as they once were, but that Americans remain fragmented by these concerns. So that was in 2017. Clearly today, it's a much different picture. The issues we face today are primarily moral, if not exclusive. You can look at the issues that we have, the wide open border and all that entails. Abortion disguised as healthcare, transgender issues that surpass all reason and facts, crime, the lack of prosecution of criminals, while defenders of the innocent are indicted and put on trial, like Daniel Penny in New York. So these are all moral issues, all divisive, all on the 2024 ballots. And Dreher puts very bluntly how he saw Trump's 2016 election. And I actually love this quote. He says that the idea that someone is robustly vulgar, fiercely combative and morally compromised as Trump will be an avatar for the restoration of Christian morality and social unity is beyond delusional. He is not a solution to the problem of America's cultural decline, but a symptom of it. So clearly, but Dreher also noted that if Trump in 2017 could appoint Supreme Court justices and lower court justices who supported religious liberty, then his administration would be a blessing to us. And thankfully he did. But if he could only be satisfied with that as his legacy, I really believe we'd be in a much better place for this election. Clearly not. But the 2024 fate has been sealed, and we are saddled with a man who has rapidly progressing dementia coupled with anger and evil intentions, and a man who is an egotistical narcissist, bombastic, crass, and at times has delusions of grandeur. To say they're both weak candidates is an understatement. However, they have vastly different agendas, and the Trump agenda, if not Trump himself, strongly represents conservative values. Sadly, we can no longer hold out for a candidate who has good and noble characteristics. That ship sailed a long time ago. We are reduced to looking at policies, but at least for now, we still have that choice. And while we have that choice, we have to act on it while we can, even if the person representing those policies is less than desirable. So this leads us to Dreher's caution for Christians, because there is the temptation to worship power and to compromise one's soul to maintain access to it. Pro-Trump Christians arguably crossed the line during the 2017 campaign season. Many climbed aboard the Trump train, some out of raw fear of Hillary Clinton winning, which I think we all feared that, among other reasons. But we do need to remember political victory does not vitiate the vice of hypocrisy. I would add to that that we need to beware the temptation to worship politics. I mean, we're all aware of politics, and I think we're all engaged, but it becomes so difficult when the stakes are so high and the multitude of information avenues all vying for our attention and screaming death and destruction. It is easy to get sucked into the 24-hour news cycle and neglect, if not outright ignore, everything else. But Christians and Christian voters must ask themselves this vital question: will the law, as written by a conservative legislature and interpreted by conservative judges, override the law of the human heart? No, it will not. Politics is no substitute for personal holiness. The best that Orthodox Christians today can hope for from politics is that it can open a space for the church to do the work of charity, culture building, and conversion. So what's a Christian to do? Well, what we can't do is disengage. I think that has been, Dreher has been interpreted as saying that, like encouraging people to withdraw from society and be in a cocoon. That's not it at all. We're not to disengage, but we want to engage differently. We must exercise our political power prudently. We cannot continue to function as we always have for two reasons. Well, two reasons and not all of them, but it didn't work looking where we are now. And we are now faced with a whole new game. So the Benedictine auction calls for increased attention to the local church and community. These entities are much closer, and therefore our impact can be much greater. The farther away things are from our backyard, the less impact we can have. We need to start close to home, our neighborhoods, our churches, our local food banks, ministries, those things that we can have a larger impact on. This is not really a new concept. I think we can find its roots in a concept called subsidiarity. I'm going to say that word a lot and I don't say it well, but anyway. That is a principle of social organization that holds that social and political issues should be dealt with at the most immediate or local level. Or Oxford Dictionary defines it as the principle that a central authority should have a subsidiary function, performing only those tasks which cannot be performed at a more local level. The subsidiarity concept has its roots in natural law philosophy of Thomas Aquinas, and it's cited by many respected philosophers, both Christian and non-Christian, as one of the most efficient and expedient ways to govern. You can actually, if you just look that up, you'll see the different versions, and there are just so many different avenues you can go down on Thomas Aquinas and natural law and various philosophers throughout history. So I thought that it really reflected what Dreher was saying, and let's focus on where we can have that impact in our backyard. So again, I say that to highlight that what Dreher is proposing, although not labeled as such, is part of a long respected theory that is proposed to lead to a healthy and flourishing society and culture. So we've got, and don't know if I can pronounce this, Yuval Levin, editor of National Affairs magazine and a fellow of Washington's Ethics and Public Policy Center, states that the religious conservatives would be better off building thriving subcultures than seeking positions of power. He says, the center has not held in American life, so we must instead find our centers for ourselves as communities of like-minded citizens. And again, centers for ourselves, not our soul, but our centers for our communities. Those seeking to reach Americans with an unfamiliar moral message, Christian values, must find them where they are. And increasingly, that means traditionalists must make their case not by planting themselves at the center of society as large institutions, but by dispersing themselves to the peripheries as small outposts. In this sense, focusing on your near-at-hand community does not involve withdrawal from contemporary America, but an increased attentiveness to it. So anybody have any comments or questions so far?
I know that's always been a major emphasis of his, and that is community building.
Yes.
So that makes his the recent events in his life, the divorce and all that, all the more tragic.
It does. And I don't know if you and I talked about it, but I had read he wrote a book about his sister's illness and dying. And it was a lot of information, information about him and also about his sister, but in the small town they grew up in. And he had moved away from the small town because he outgrew it. He couldn't wait to leave. He was an intellectual. He read a lot, and it was just a small country place. But when he left, and when his sister became ill, he admired the way that she had always lived there, and the community around her was so strong and built around and came around her and loved her and her family, that he was really inspired to move back home. That was his impetus to leave the big city and go back to his roots, because he could see the benefit of it and the strength of it and how it could help to grow the person. So I think
and he was so proud of this little Orthodox community of believers that he was a part of.
Yes.
And I guess that's all dissolved.
I don't.
3 or 4 years.
Maybe. I don't know what happened in the town just with his marriage. I'm not sure if the whole if the little community has gone astray. I don't know, but all right. So good. And we can't see if there are any comments. So okay. So while focusing the majority of our energy locally, there is still one area that requires all the attention we have left for national politics, and that is religious freedom. Religious freedom is critical for the Benedict option. There we go. Religious liberty is critically important to the Benedict option. Without a robust and successful defense of First Amendment protections, Christians will not be able to build the communal institutions that are vital to maintaining our identity and our values. What's more, Christians who do not act decisively within the embattled zone of freedom we have now are wasting precious time that may run out faster than we think. And religious freedom is under severe and relentless attack. I know that those of us here, we hear that all the time. We hear it on the podcasts that we listen to, the books that we read, the speakers that we listen to. And I think I hear it so often that I tend to, it kind of loses its impact. So I thought what I would do is just name just a couple of current cases or most recent cases. And I went to the website for Alliance Defending Freedom. Probably most people know what that is, but for those that don't, I want to do a quick little, their mission statement. The ADF advances the God-given right to live and speak truth. We contend for the truth in law, policy, and the public square, and equip the Alliance to do the same. ADF will walk boldly into the wind with resilience and with courage, and we will do as we have done the hard things to which God has called us with the expectation that he will accomplish his purposes. And again, I just wanted to cite just a few little cases that just brought it home. And if you go on their website, there are hundreds, if not thousands. I mean, and again, it's an endless list. But there's one, and this one has to do with a particularly, I think, insidious new practice that our federal government has undertaken, and it's the debanking that I think some of us may have heard of. But the federal government, they target what they consider terrorist groups or threats, and the bank will then monitor their accounts, and they have tag words like MAGA or Trump or Christian literature or Dick's Sporting Good or Cabela's. Can't buy a gun, I guess. So these things are targeted. But in 2023, this is one of the cases on their website, Bank of America closed a long-standing bank account of Indigenous Advanced Ministries, a Christian nonprofit that helps impoverished widows and children in Uganda. The bank also closed the account of a local Tennessee church that donates to the ministry. The bank claimed it no longer wanted to serve their business type, and the Indigenous Advance exceeded the bank's tolerance. The bank's abrupt decision created a logistical nightmare for Indigenous Advance and inflicted real harm on the populations they serve. And then JP Morgan Chase debanked the Arkansas Family Council for being high risk and never provided a credible reason for canceling the account of former US Senator Sam Brownback's organization, the National Committee for Religious Freedom. And then Wells Fargo denied payment processing to the pro-life group, the Ruth Institute. These are some of the many instances of viewpoint-based debanking and are likely only the tip of the iceberg. And how that isn't bias or prejudice or any other outlawed practice, I don't know, but they're getting away with it. Yes, Dan.
Two things very quickly.
Yes.
A previous administration, President Obama's administration, but it wasn't just President Obama's. His Secretary of State, Secretary Clinton, was started using the same phrase, and the phrase sounds like, oh, that's what we believe in. The phrase is freedom of worship. They started promoting the phrase freedom of worship.
Yes.
But freedom of worship is something you can do in a North Korean gulag.
Right.
What the Constitution says is free exercise of religion, which means you get to build buildings, you get to hold classes, you get to have an ordained clergy performing rituals, you get to have a school, you get to have all these things. But freedom of worship is something you can do in your head. So it's very unsullied, if I may, and you can take your religious ideas into the public marketplace. Yes. For the debate. Well, I was just
Right,
coming,
right.
I was just coming to that.
Worship
I was
is
just
within the
coming to
four
that.
walls, and religious freedom is outside the four walls. So.
President Obama's chairman of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, Martin Castro, who sounded in this quote a little bit like certain other Castros, said that, quote, religion is being used because the whole question is what they want is what they want to know is what religion is for. What will you do for me? How does this help me? And it's like, no, I'm my own citizen. I get to have my religion. You can do your thing over there, but I have my thing, and my thing doesn't have to serve your particular agenda. And this is what they don't get. So anyway, so this is Martin Castro, President Obama's chairman of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. Quote, religion is being used as both a weapon and a shield by those seeking to deny others equality. The phrases religious liberty and religious freedom will stand for nothing except hypocrisy so long as they remain code words for discrimination, intolerance, racism, sexism, homophobia, Islamophobia, or any form of intolerance.
Exactly.
And he can't recognize the intolerance there.
Right. Or the doublespeak or any of that. So we're the redefining of words. Thank you, Dan. All right, I'll cite one more. So there was, well, that was 2018. We'll do this one. So more recently, so it was ADF versus the Christian Healthcare Centers versus Nestle, and ADF represented Christian Healthcare, represents a Michigan faith-based medical nonprofit organization that provides high-quality healthcare to all and offers substantially reduced prices for patients with lower income. But a Michigan law requires Christian Healthcare to prescribe cross-sex hormones to facilitate efforts to alter a patient's biological sex. Doing so, of course, violates the ministry's religious beliefs and it undermines its ability to provide safe health care to its community. So the ministry is challenging that law. So it's an active state. And then I will do this one other one. I'll do it really quick. But you've got Downtown Hope Center versus the municipality, I can't say it, of Anchorage. In 2018, so it's a little older, but when a man who identifies as a woman tried to gain access to a woman's shelter, he was injured and intoxicated. So the center's director sent him to a local hospital to get medical care he needed. She even paid for the taxi. Soon after, a complaint was filed against the Hope Center with the Anchorage Civil Rights Commission, claiming the center had discriminated against this individual. But the Hope Center never violated the law. In fact, it got this man the care he needed. But unbelievably, the Anchorage officials twisted the law to attempt to force the Hope Center to admit men to its women's shelter. The motivation was clear. They wanted to force this faith-based homeless shelter to get on board with their political agenda, all at the expense of the vulnerable women the Hope Center uniquely serves. So anyway, I say these just to cite that these are just, what, 3? And on that website, there are so many. So it really is under attack. Even if, and we certainly don't hear about these on the news all the time. They're not going to put them out there, but we need to be aware so that we know it really is happening and be ready. So these are just a few of the thousands of legal attacks filed every year. ADF gets at least 6,000 requests a year for legal assistance for religious freedom lawsuits. Most don't make the news, but the battles rage in the attacks every single day. As I was preparing for this talk and I'm listening to the news, I just keep hearing things every single day. And I just want to bring this one up. Albert Mohler, of course, Nellie, thank you. Last Thursday was talking about this new terrible law in Scotland. I'm sure a lot of us heard about it. And I don't know the details. I just know that it's supposed to protect transgender and gender identity, and it can be considered a hate crime. But what I did read briefly was that it seems to be largely left up to the police to decide whether or not it's a crime. So it's not written clearly. And what is amazing as well is J.K. Rowling, who is no Christian, of Harry Potter fame, is standing up against it. She goes, if I call a man and a woman, arrest me, please. So she's willing to stand up and be courageous. But it's just another example that these are happening just daily. And it's just a lot to keep up with. So we must not be fooled, and we must act when and where we can while there's still time. I know that sounds hyperbolic, but it's not. We must act decisively, even if it seems small and inconsequential, like the required use of pronouns, which is compelled speech, baking a cake, making a website. We must act while we still can. Drew goes on, and he gives an example in the chapter of, he goes into a lot of detail. I'm going to try and keep it short, but of a 10-year Republican Kansas legislator, Lance Kinzer. Kinzer supported the bill in 2014 to expand religious liberty in Kansas in anticipation of a court-imposed gay marriage. And being in this solid red state, he anticipated it would easily pass. But he says, quote unquote, there was a firestorm like he had never seen, and it did not pass. And the push came largely from the local Chamber of Commerce, local media, and then the national media got a hold of it and it blew it up and it didn't pass. Now, Kinzer had already decided to leave politics, but this just really sealed the deal for him. He said it was time for him to move on. He went on to focus on his church, having come to the conclusion that there is a real work of culture reclamation and renewal, not outside the church so much as inside the church, that really needs to happen. He goes on to say, the big challenge, especially for evangelicals who always believe there was some sort of silent majority with them, is to come to terms with the fact that this is just not true. This is difficult. It's disorienting. Internalizing this fact is difficult and it's disorienting for a lot of people, me included. But we really have to face that fact that there may be long ago, but it never woke up, and it certainly isn't there now. We're the minority. He goes on to say, we need forms of living that reinforce the kind of strangers in exile sense that is well grounded in Scripture. And just a real quick verse from 1 Peter 2:11 through 12. He says, dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. So this leads us to the anti-political politics. So the Benedict option begins with the recognition that Western society is post-Christian and that absent a miracle, there is no hope of reversing this condition. This means that what Orthodox, small o, Christians can accomplish through conventional politics has narrowed considerably, and trying to reclaim our lost influence will be a waste of energy. Most Americans will not only reject many things that traditional Christians consider good, but they will call them evil. So Dreher says instead, Christians must turn their attention to a different kind of politics. In the years to come, faithful Christians may have to choose between being a good American and being a good Christian. Dreher cites Alexis de Tocqueville, who was a young French aristocrat who traveled through America in 1831 through 1832 and wrote Democracy in America. He stated then that with democracy's drive for equality, which entailed making standards relative to the majority's will, risk eliminating the virtues that made this self-rule possible. Oh, thank you. Paul was telling me to change my thing. Alexis de Tocqueville was convinced that democracy could not survive the loss of Christian faith. Self-government required shared convictions about moral truths. Christian faith drew men outside themselves and taught them that laws must be firmly rooted in a moral order revealed and guaranteed by God. He says, if a democratic nation loses religion, then it falls prey to inordinate individualism, materialism, and democratic despotism, and inevitably prepares its citizens for servitude to a tyrant, not to God. Therefore, said Tocqueville, one must maintain Christianity within the new democracies at all costs. And I would say that we have fallen prey to all of those: individualism, materialism, all of those. So we have not done that. Christians, I hate to say it, we fell asleep at the wheel. I think we just kept imagining that things would get better or swing back, or they wouldn't go that crazy, or if we just do what we're supposed to do, everybody else will follow along. But it just didn't. It just does not happen. Tocqueville is right. Conservative Christians must now prepare ourselves for very dark times. The 2016 election was a harbinger. Americans had to choose between an establishment Democrat deeply hostile to core Christian values and to religious liberty, and an outsider Republican of no particular religious commitment who sold himself as a strongman who would impose order by will. And here we are again, faced with the same dismal choice, yet more dire, because Biden, whoever is animating Biden, has made it abundantly clear what his government looks like and what havoc he will continue to heap upon this nation and the world. Where am I? At this
Can I say
point,
one thing?
of course.
I do know that Trump has a good group of good, solid Christians around him to advise him.
That is hopeful.
Jack Graham,
Mhm.
Franklin Graham are two that I know of for certain.
That is
So
really
he
good
is
to
being
know.
advised by good, strong Christians.
Wonderful.
That may not mean a whole lot, but that input is going in there.
I think, well, in his policies, I mean, what he is supporting do support our values to a large extent, albeit he's kind of twisted a little on abortion for now, but expedient politicians, I guess that's what they're going to do. But it's good to know he has advisors and that by and large, his agenda is clearly so much better than Biden. And it's good to know he does have some good advisors around him, Christian. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so at this point, Dreher brings up a very interesting and fairly new theory. And it's based on, let's see, a Notre Dame political theorist wrote a book called Conserving America. In it, he argues that both political parties are descended from Enlightenment liberalism. And according to Deneen, Enlightenment liberalism is built on the premise that humans are by nature free and independent, and that the purpose of government is to liberate the autonomous individual. Making progress toward this goal, whether promoted by free market parties of the right or statist egalitarian parties on the left, depends on denying natural limits. So which is antithetical to Scripture. We are not autonomous. We are answerable to God, and God has imposed humans with limits. To deny this is to deny truth and creation order. And I just happened to see on Albert Mohler again, on his most recent Thinking in Public, he interviews Patrick Deneen, who has written a new book. He wrote this one, The Conserving America, in 2016, In 2018, he wrote a book called Why Liberalism Failed. And then he's just written a new one called Regime Change Toward a Post-Liberal Future. And what he's basing it on, just very loosely because it's very detailed and it's a very interesting interview, on classical liberalism and classical conservatism. But he does speak about how if our goal is to have unchecked personal freedom and liberty, this is not biblical. And he says that tends to be the roots of our two political parties. So that really what we need is a whole culture change, a kind of a paradigm shift, so that the Christian values can be part of that structure. Yes, Dan.
I would just, y'all don't have to believe a word I say. I have reams of emails I can send you though, but I believe that there is every reason to reject Deneen's whole thesis in how liberalism failed or why liberalism failed. He is trying to argue that the founders and the framers, the founders of America, the framers of the Constitution, that their idea of liberty is identical to Planned Parenthood. That they want that modern, what we consider modern illiberal liberalism, traces its roots legitimately back to George Washington and Jefferson and Franklin and Madison, et cetera, et cetera. And I argue that this is simply false, and that the framers and founders are on record saying that their idea of freedom and what they meant by pursuit of happiness, that this included virtue.
Agreed.
And
Agreed.
that it required religion and faith.
Agreed.
To preserve. And so I think Deneen is actually, I'm not taking anything away from Dreer's,
yeah.
I'm taking anything away from Dreer's book, but I think that Deneen's whole thing, and this caused a huge row in a number of conservative circles, including at First Things Magazine, which I subscribe to, because the editor fell in love with the Deneen thesis, and this led to huge pushback. But yeah, I think Deneen has this completely wrong, and that Deneen wants to blame the founders and framers and classical liberalism generally for the monstrosities that we see out there every day.
Well, if I can interject, because I'm sure we could debate that. You clearly know a lot more than I do. I know very, very superficially about this. But what it seems to me is I haven't heard that, and you know more than I do, but even in the interview with Mohler, which I did listen to the whole thing, that was not the premise. It was more, is it the logical conclusion that one would draw if you draw it out to its end, to its logical end? He didn't say anything about it being the founding fathers meant that, but that if you take the liberty and the freedom to its logical end, given the beginning, you kind of come to the same place just by two different roads.
If you think that the founders and framers have that definition of what liberty means, and I argue powerfully, at least I think it's powerfully.
Yeah.
I think there's plenty of ammunition.
I agree with you that the founders didn't do that. Yeah.
Than what Deneen sees. And
okay.
So
we'll table that.
It's true. If you just if laissez-faire or libertarianism is we're gonna put a liquor store on this floor and the brothel here and the
okay, we gotta well and you're good, and I would love to have a debate, but you know more than I do, so I'll just be listening. So but anyway, the question before us now, given that perhaps both sides are going to lead to unchecked liberty and freedom, which is not biblical, is it a betrayal of liberal democracy, or given its core principles of individuality and egalitarianism, liberal democracy's inevitable fulfillment under secularism? And that brings us to a crossroads. A civilization in which no one feels obligated to others. Wait, hold on. Did I do that? Nope. All right. No, okay. All right. I'm sorry. I have another quote and it's not there. Pardon me. This is contrary to what both scripture and experience teach us about human nature, the freedom. The purpose of civilization is not to guarantee unfettered freedom, but has been to sustain and support familial, social, and cultural structures and practices that perpetrate and deepen personal and intergenerational forms of obligation and gratitude, of duty and indebtedness. A civilization in which no one feels obligated to others, to the past, or to the future is a civilization that has no calling to anything higher than self, is what we have now. And it is a precarious situation at best. Dreer notes that Augustine described society in the waning years of the Roman Empire as being preoccupied with pleasure-seeking, selfishness, and living for the moment. And again, our current situation. So the question before us now is whether, all right, we gotta get that one. So given that we're at a crossroads, so we've reached a culminating moment when it is less a political movement that is needed than a revival of culture. And Dreher says, so what we need is not the second coming of Ronald Reagan or any other political savior. So we have to remember what Psalm 146:3 says, put not your trust in princes or mortal men. But how do we do that politically? And we have to move on to a useful model. So Dreher states that we have much to learn. This is a solution. Here's some things we can do. So Dreher states that we have much to learn from the experience of Czech descendants under communism. Dreher's model is Václav Havel and the Czech dissident movement under communism. Havel was a playwright and a political prisoner. His answer was to create and support the kind of anti-political politics that Havel advocated, in which the truth can be lived in community. This has nothing to do with escapism or Christian pietism, but it does provide an alternative for conscientious Christians committed to a life of discipleship. The essence of Havel's model is living in truth. He uses kind of a parable or an example, Havel, in his 1978 essay called The Power of the Powerless. In the essay, he proposes that there's a greengrocer who's living under communism, who puts a sign in his shop window saying, "Workers of the world unite." He does not believe in the slogan, but posts it to keep the peace, to stay out of trouble. He rationalizes to himself, well, what's wrong with workers uniting? He allows fear to control his actions, and fear allows the official ideology to retain power and to eventually change the grocer's beliefs. Havel says those who live within a lie collaborate with the system and compromise their full humanity. So I had to put these two together, Workers Unite, Workers Unite, and Black Lives Matter. I'm sure we all remember the people in the riots putting Black Lives Matter posters in their businesses, hoping that they would be spared being burned down and trashed, and largely it didn't work. But I think that it was a clear parallel. But he goes on to say, what if the grocer refuses to go along to get along? His small revolt is an attempt to live within the truth, and it will cost him plenty. Job, reputation, status, it could be bullied and lose and ostracized. Just as we know people in corporate America or in other businesses who have lost their jobs and lost their reputations and lost everything by speaking truth. We have to have that same courage. And if and when we get the opportunity to speak truth, we need to stand up for it and have the courage to do so. But the grocer, he bears witness to the truth of his convictions by being willing to suffer for them. He becomes a threat to the system, but he preserves his humanity. And that, says Havel, is a far more important accomplishment than whether this party or that politician hold power. Havel says that we need a better system that will not come without effort and intentionality. Dreher gives a beautiful example of this better system from a mathematician and dissident, Václav Benda. Benda's contribution to the dissident movement was the idea of a parallel polis, a separate but porous society existing alongside the official communist order. Benda's point was that the dissidents could not simply protest communism, but had to support positive engagement within the world. To Benda, Havel's call to live in truth could only mean one thing: living in community as a Christian. He says, Havel, I personally think there's no less effective, exceptionally painful, and in the short term, practically irreparable way of eliminating the human race or individual nations would be a decline into barbarism, the abandonment of reason and learning, and the loss of tradition and memory. And again, we can see that happening in our society every single day. Barbarism, people clearly abandon reason and learning, and tradition and by tearing down statues and changing books and rewriting them when they don't like them. So we're seeing that happen now. So the aim of our movement, this Benedict option, this strengthening of our communities must be precisely the opposite of destruction. We want to create a parallel polis that is not a gated community, but it must be about building and establishing common practices and common institutions that can reverse the isolation and fragmentation of contemporary society. Dissident Christians should see their Benedict option projects as building a better future, not only for themselves, but for everyone around them. We hope our faith to change the world one day. We have to start locally. These communities start with the individual heart and spread from there to the family, to the church, to the neighborhood, to the city, to the state. We just keep building outward. Again, we're not building in, we're building out, but we have to have that strong base from which to build upon. Conventional American politics cannot fix what is wrong with our society and culture. They are inadequate, among other things, because both their left-wing and right-wing forms operate from a position that facilitating and expanding human choice is the proper end of our politics. Maybe. But the left and right just disagree on how to get there. And I have seen on both left and right that is a goal, that libertarianism for one, which is on the right for the most part. So the politics of the Benedict option assume that the disorder in American public life derives from disorder in the American soul. Benedict option politics start with the proposition that the most important political work of our time is the restoration of inner order, harmonizing with the will of God. Everything else flows from that. Havel states that the best resistance to totalitarianism is to simply drive it out of our own souls, our own circumstances, and our own land, to drive it out of the contemporary humankind. This is same for our corrosive anti-Christian philosophy that has taken over American public life. So how do we do this? Again, we start locally with small communities and like-minded Christians. As American society degenerates, more people will seek something real and meaningful. It is our mandate as Christians to offer it to them. And here's how to get started. Secede culturally from the mainstream, not from the whole world. Turn off the TV, put our smartphones away, read books, start a church, meet with a group, sing songs, just live a rich life with strong traditions, and let's build them inward and outward. Believers must avoid the usual trap of thinking that politics can solve cultural and religious problems. The deep cultural forces that have been separating the West from God for centuries will not be halted or reversed by a single election or any election at all. We are a minority now, so let's be a creative one, offering warm living, light-filled alternative to a world growing cold, dead, and dark. Losing political power might just be the thing that saves the church's soul. Ceasing to believe that the fate of the American empire is in our hands frees us to use them to work for the kingdom of God in our own little shires. So, which I love The Hobbit. All right. So, any questions, any comments? I have one chat there. Thank you. Let me see if I can look at the chat. Yes, ma'am.
While we're building our communities, we also need to think about local politics. We talked a lot about
Absolutely.
national, but start with your HOA. I mean,
You're right.
everybody's got an HOA. School boards. How many school boards are trying to put books into kids' libraries that shouldn't be there?
Right.
City elections, the mayor, the city council, the sheriffs.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think, and that was the point we started with, right? Was we want to start with those things closest to us, our
Yes.
closest politics,
Yeah.
our own backyard, like you said, our school boards, our HOA. That's a great place.
And the thing is, get involved. I mean,
yes.
I learned this working on a campaign in Texas.
Mm.
We kicked out the rhino. The guy I was
Nice.
working for didn't win, but the guy who did win was a good guy. I think he's in the House, the federal House, now national.
Nice.
But yeah, you can do a lot by just getting the right person.
Right.
McCall dropped out because Wayne said, "I'm going to run," and McCall said, "I ain't running against him,"
Right.
and he dropped out. So
We can have an impact,
Yeah.
right? We can have an
Yes.
impact. Absolutely. Let me see what this chat is. Oh, wow. Janet says you lived and worked in the Czech Republic with Havel when he was president. Oh, wow, Janet, where'd you go? I don't know how to make this smaller. How do I make the PowerPoint go away? Stop share.
Yes,
Wow.
I got to experience him because he was an artist when the communists first put him in prison,
Right.
fighting for freedom. And so he went from, they gave him the job of being a street sweeper. So he went from being a street sweeper to when the Soviet Union left in '94 to the first president back after that.
That is amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
He was inspiring.
Yes. Yes. All right. Yes.
Sort of a comment.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think he doesn't do in his book, The Benedict Adoption, is he doesn't really define how you get from orthodoxy to orthopraxy. I mean, those are his terms.
True.
And the question is, by what standard? And the authority of what standard? And how do you do that? So what standard do you adopt when you actually want to impose certain changes to, say, government law or certain changes to civil law?
Mm-hmm.
So that's still an open question for people to address. He has a lot of good ideas on how one should act, but the basis upon which those actions are taken isn't really fully vetted.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Other comments, questions?
I was
Yeah.
just thinking about something as you're presenting, and I agree with what you're saying, and I agree with Drew. I just think that Drew maybe he doesn't think enough about foreign policy.
Mm.
I think the people of Israel are probably very concerned about who's going to become our next president.
Agreed.
Probably Ukraine would be along those lines, maybe China as well, but Taiwan anyway. I don't know, I just think that there's a quote in that Lord of the Rings where one hobbit speaks to the other, and he says, at least we'll always have the Shire, and then he says, if we don't handle this, there may not be a Shire.
That is true. That is true.
So, I don't know if Greer looks at it from that perspective as much. I think we certainly should.
Agreed. And I think what I think, and I think maybe he does too, who knows, but that we haven't paid a lot of attention to local politics. Maybe we need to shift our attention from all of it, not to take it all away from federal, but to let's put some of that attention in local,
totally.
right? Because it's so much easier to do on federal. Because you know what, we can't really do anything. We can listen to it, we can debate it, and we can talk about it, but we have very little control or power, especially now that we're in the minority. But I agree, we still have, those are huge issues. And what Biden has done to Israel is just terrible.
Well, if we
Sold
do
them
it
out.
in the local over the long run.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Right. And if you can strengthen our local, it can also grow up, right? We want to build those strong foundations so that when the time comes, like Havel, one of our guys can take over. Or not take over, but be president.
Oh, I said, be careful who you elect as PA.
Oh, all of,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah. Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent, Donna.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
All right, thank
Yeah. Well, kind of the gist of the book in general is that many Christians are concerned about these issues. We're getting typically little, if no help from the local church. Now, again, some are better than others, obviously, but generally speaking, they're providing their evangelical churches are really failing. And so if we're going to make any impact on society at all, we need to start locally and build strong networks of community, build up one another. That's what he was trying to do there in Baton Rouge when he was involved in that small little Orthodox church. That is that's a great challenge, and it's fallen apart on him, of course, because of personal issues, marital problems, and so on. And for many, many years, we were involved in the house church movement, operating under some of the same premises. And we experienced just how difficult that is as well. These were intentional communities intended to provide alternatives to just mainstream, institutionalized Christianity. But all of these efforts are really fraught with complications and great challenges. One thing I think I wish he had emphasized more is that the left is all about increasing authoritarian government control over every aspect of our lives. Now, some people think that the antidote to that is libertarianism. It's not at all. And that's what takes us back to the founding fathers. And they understood. Now, back then, of course, 250 years ago, there was more of Christian influence in America. And a lot of people back then were relatively biblically literate as opposed to today. And you might say the better people are, yeah, of course, the less government you need. But things have changed drastically over the last 250 years. But the founding fathers even understood that the antidote to authoritarian monarchy, which was the issue they had to deal with, is not libertarianism, but rather it is integrating virtue and freedom. And someone said years ago that, yes, we have our Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor. We should have thought to build a statue of virtue in San Francisco Bay, which of course would be the last place you would expect to have such a thing. But we need that integration. It's not a balance, it's more of an integration, and that is virtue and freedom. So any last thoughts on the book? And Donna, excellent coverage. Thank you very much. Great presentation. Those of you joining us online, any comments before we close things out for the evening? Okay, well, great being with you. And so let's take it seriously. We are very privileged to live right here, right now, and God has arranged for us to do just that. We need to take our responsibility seriously. This book can help a lot. It doesn't have all the answers, but there's a lot of wisdom and truth in this book. And Donna, thanks for doing such an excellent job exposing those truths in chapter 4. So we'll continue on next week. We have 2 more sessions. So we'll cover as much of the book as possible in the last 2 sessions. And I think you'll enjoy it very much. And again, thanks. Good to be with you all, and those of you joining us online as well. All right. Good night.